Week 4, fantasy football running back rankings, everything you guys need to know to set your running back lineups. We're going to go through injury reports, my top 36 running back rankings in tier list format so that you guys know exactly who you need to be starting. Let's kick things off with the injury reports, the guys that we need to be monitoring in our fantasy football lineups this week. Starting with Jaylen Warren of the Pittsburgh Steelers. He's been a limited participant in practice all week with a knee injury. Nick Farabaugh, who covers the Steelers, said that they're going to basically test him pregame, see how he reacts. They do play in that Ireland game at 9:30 a.m. Eastern, so you will have pivot options into the 1 p.m. slate and so on if he doesn't go. But just keep that in mind. I did rank him rather conservatively, knowing that he's coming in with an injury. And if he ends up getting ruled out, then Caleb Johnson is a pickup. Kenneth Gainwell, probably the one that I would play of the two options if I needed an extra flex spot. Chuba Hubbard, full practice Wednesday, no issues. On Thursday, he was downgraded to limited with a calf injury and then practiced again in a limited capacity on Friday. We do probably have some reason for optimism that he's going to play, but just make sure Rico Dowdle is rostered just in case that he doesn't go or in case he's limited. Dowdle could end up being a big pickup if he re-aggravates that injury. And then Bill of the Washington Commanders did not practice with a knee injury Wednesday and Thursday, but was upgraded to full with a knee injury on Friday. Now, Terry McLaurin and Jaden Daniels both aren't playing, so the offense will probably take a hit in general, but keep an eye on Chris Rodriguez, keep an eye on Jeremy McNichols and how their workloads are going to shape up. As you can see, we have the new update, so on the screen you could see the PPR points per game of these players, the implied point totals in blue there, who they're playing, their name, and the fantasy points per game rank of them at the running back position. So shout out to the devs for getting this done for us. I think this makes this video just so much better. You guys can see a lot more information on the screen. Getting into the S tier of running back plays this week, these are the elite guys in your lineup no matter what. Number 1, we have Christian McCaffrey versus the Jacksonville Jaguars, 4th rated against fantasy football running backs, 25.75 implied points for the 49ers, 30% target share for a running back is absolute stupidity, 6% more than the PPR scam Devon Achane. So if you think the PPR scam of Devon Achane is insane, wait till you see Christian McCaffrey. This guy is literally averaging 23.3 fantasy points per game without a touchdown on the season, which is ridiculous because that means he is potentially capable of being a 25, 26 point per game running back for as long as he is on the field. Number 2 running back for me on the week is Saquon Barkley versus the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They rank 26th against fantasy football running backs in adjusted fantasy points allowed, just 15.1 PPR points per game so far this season for Saquon Barkley. Los Angeles is like the best run defense in the league, so I'm not too worried about him having 9.5 PPR points last week. 23.5 implied point total for the Philadelphia Eagles, and the second most receiving yards per game allowed to the running back position are the Tampa Bay Buccaneers through the first 3 games. So I do think Barkley can get it done in the passing game. Servassier Dennis, a major coverage weakness for us. I do think they're going to, look to exploit that weakness, and Saquon is probably going to have a great game as a result of that. Bijan Robinson, my RB3 on the week versus the Washington Commanders. They are the lowest rated coverage defense in football by PFF grade over the first 3 weeks of the season. So hopefully, the only problem for Bijan last week and why he only scored 16 PPR points is because the offense scored 0 points and Penix couldn't move the ball, turn the ball over, and that kind of thing. So use some play action, throw the ball to Drake London. Let's get some red zone opportunities for Bijan Robinson because he's pretty much had to do everything himself so far this year, and he's still a top 5 running back averaging over 20 points per game. Let's get the offense playing better. Let's get some red zone and goal line opportunities for the guy because Algier sniped one of them. And Bijan's, I believe, only touchdown of the season came on a 50-yard, screen touchdown or whatever. So he's had to do everything himself. Hopefully he gets some help this week from his offense and his quarterback. Number 4 running back on the week for me is James Cook versus the 27th ranked New Orleans Saints. Easy matchup here, 31.75 implied point total for the Bills offense. They're 15.5 point favorites. You kind of just got to hope and pray that James Cook scores early. Otherwise, this game could get ugly and the Bills could pull their starters at some point late in the game. So coming off of a week where he had 65% of the snaps, 79% of the rushing attempts, I would imagine that James Cook's workload takes a bit of a hit this week because of the matchup that they have. It should be an easy win for the Bills, but the dude's averaging almost 23 points per game in fantasy. He's been an absolute revelation out of the mid-rounds so far. Jonathan Taylor versus the Los Angeles Rams, the best run defense in the league. We saw what they did to Saquon Barkley last week. And I do think in general, the Colts may come back to earth a little bit in this game where Jonathan Taylor looks mortal, Daniel Jones looks mortal. So I've downgraded Jonathan Taylor to my RB5. It's a tough road game for Indianapolis. It wouldn't shock me if they lose this game and maybe struggle as an overall offense. So even though Jonathan Taylor is the RB1 in fantasy, averaging 25 points per game with an elite workload, 81% of the snaps on the season, 74% of the routes, I do think it's possible that this one is not as dominant of a victory for the Indianapolis Colts, and I do actually think they will lose that game. Number 6 running back on the week for me is Jahmyr Gibbs versus the Cleveland Browns. Browns are a bad matchup. The Browns also love to slow the game down. Bottom 5 in offensive plays ran against them as a defense, and keep in mind, they've played some really good offenses. The Packers, the Ravens in week 2. Gibbs is a monster, though. 20 points per game this season. Best game of the year last week. Expect a lot of runs from the Lions because they're 10-point home favorites in this game. So this definitely profiles to me as a Jahmyr Gibbs, David Montgomery game, more so than Jared Goff kind of slinging it all over the yard, because the Browns are just a really good defense in general, and they don't really allow you to play that type of game, but they are exploitable from big plays, as we saw by the Ravens there. So moving into the next tier of running backs, we have the A tier running back plays. And I used to do 6 at a time, but I think it's more helpful for you guys if you know who's actually in the same tier. So it's not going to be as clean, as crisp 6 at a time in every single tier. I am going to just, rank these guys based on who I think are similar caliber of plays. So that's going to result in a little bit better information for you guys in terms of who you actually start. Devon Achane is my running back 7 on the week versus the New York Jets. They are 24th against fantasy running backs. Achane's 26% target share is so remarkable, and it's only being overshadowed by the fact that McCaffrey is a 30% target share, which is ludicrous for a running back. This game has a 45-point over-under, and I actually really like this game to potentially shoot out on Monday Night Football. The Jets are a bad run defense. They're a bad defense overall, but especially against the run. This should be a nice performance from Achane, who is getting an exceptional workload, 82% of the snaps, 61% of the carries, 79% of the routes, 19.6 PPR points per game is what he's averaging. And keep in mind, Tua's looked really bad over this stretch. So if Tua in the offense as a passing unit can really pick things up, then Devon Achane's going to have a lot more red zone opportunities, a lot more big play opportunities. So the fact that Achane is producing at this level with the offense playing as bad as it is remarkable. And I do think they'll actually get back on track in this game. So I love Achane to have a great week. Running back 8, Bucky Irving for me against the Philadelphia Eagles. Bucky's quiet but solid start to the season, in my opinion, is a sleeping giant. I think a lot of people would look at his production and go, okay, 15.5 PPR points per game. That's good. I drafted this guy in the second round. I would like a little bit more from him, but he's RB10 in points per game so far this year. He's been one of the more inefficient runners in the league, which is wild because he was one of the most efficient running backs in the league a year ago. It's not his fault, though. The offensive line's been hurt, but now we have the best left tackle in football coming back for this game. It looks like Tristan Wirfs is going to play, and I think people who don't really, focus on offensive line play don't really understand what that means to an offensive line. To have a guy like Tristan Wirfs out there, he makes everybody's job easier. He makes everybody better on the line. He's the captain of that group. So I do think that you should feel very comfortable knowing that Bucky Irving is probably going to have better efficiency going forward. And I think your buying window is closing pretty quickly on him, because even though this is a tough matchup against the Eagles, I do think he could have a more efficient day running the football on the ground. Derrick Henry versus the Kansas City Chiefs is my RB9 on the week. His worst rushing performance grades in back-to-back weeks of his career. Under 48.0 for PFF rushing is the worst stretch of his career so far. The Chiefs are not what we expected them to be as a run defense from last year. They were actually the best run defense in the league, and they're actually just 29th in run defense grade. And the Ravens are implied for over 25 points in a game environment that has a 48.5 point over-under. The Ravens are favored on the road at Arrowhead, and I think if you're giving Patrick Mahomes points at home, that seems a little bit shaky on the market's perspective, but there is 8% steam to the over in this game, so I do think that generally this should be a pretty high-scoring matchup, and I do think the Ravens are the better team at this point in time, so I do think Derrick Henry hopefully doesn't fumble the game away and hopefully gets back on track from an efficiency standpoint here. Number 10 for me is Amarian Hampton versus the New York Giants. Chargers are implied for over 25 points as nearly a touchdown favorite against a rookie quarterback and a defense that prior to last week was bottom 5 in every rushing defense category possible. So the Giants may have shut down Kareem Hunt and Isaiah Pacheco, but that's like playing a Division II school to boost your stats after getting wiped by Javonte Williams and the Commanders running backs in the first 2 games. They were a bottom 6 run defense in success rate allowed, EPA per play, fantasy points allowed, run defense grade, DVOA, everything you could possibly look at. They were a terrible run defense. So I think Amari Hampton is going to continue his breakout kind of performances here. We saw him post 25 fantasy points per game last week. I think that continues. I think this is the week that he houses a big one. So if you have Amari Hampton on your fantasy team, you should feel very, very good about his performance this week. Josh Jacobs versus the Dallas Cowboys. The Cowboys are 31st in run defense grade versus PFF, according to PFF, this year. And that's despite Kenny Clark being added to the team. The Packers are favored. The defense probably will eat against an offense in Dallas that doesn't have CeeDee Lamb and is missing some starting offensive linemen as well. Feel confident that Jacobs is going to get fed a lot of carries in this game. Keep an eye on Jacobs, though. He hasn't been special this year. You've seen his fantasy performances have kind of been somewhat middling. He's been solid. He hasn't been special. The offense has been really good, but he needs to really pick up his own play, in my opinion, because right now it's trending towards Josh Jacobs being one of those safe RB1s that you feel confident in every week, but never gives you those 30-point weeks, never gives you that 20 points per game type of season that you're looking for. So keep an eye on Jacobs. If he has a good game in this one, I would consider selling high, trying to tier up to a guy with a little bit more upside, a little bit more juice, a little bit more receiving skill set. So just keep that in mind with Josh Jacobs, but he is a great play this week. Breece Hall versus the Miami Dolphins closes out the RB1s territory for me. Versus the Miami Dolphins, they are 31st against the run. The Dolphins are the worst defense in the NFL through 3 games. It's actually not even really close. Justin Fields should be back for the Jets. He's been fully practicing. He still has to get cleared out of the protocol, but I do think we're going to see him in this game. And I also think that week 1 Jets performance that we saw Breece Hall looking great, Garrett Wilson looking great, Justin Fields able to move the ball and read defenses. I think we're going to see that because this is a really nice tune-up game. This is a game you get your offense back on track. The Jets are implied for 21.5 points. For an 0-3 team, that's pretty solid and a good indication that the market thinks that Justin Fields is going to play. So I do think Breece Hall has a chance to have a nice game in this one. Maybe go buy low on him because he's had 2 back-to-back bad weeks. Alvin Kamara versus the Buffalo Bills is my RB13 on the week. He hasn't gotten much going through the air this year, but the usage is right up there with past years. Like you could see his route participation of 73%. That's as good as the Achans and CMCs of the world. He just hasn't really seen the targets for whatever reason. This is the fastest paced game environment of the entire slate, this Bills and Saints game. And we probably do expect the Saints to be playing from behind for a good majority of it. I guess the only hope here is that you don't want them to get blown out like they did last week because they kind of just stopped using Kamara at certain points in that game. But it is a 48.5 point over under. I actually like Alvin Kamara to go higher on his 20.5 receiving yards in this game because he hasn't hit this yet in 2025. So it's kind of a depressed total, but he hit it in every single loss but one for the New Orleans Saints last year. Because when they're playing from behind, they usually feed Alvin Kamara out of the backfield. Running back 14 for me is Jordan Mason versus the Pittsburgh Steelers, and that's going to close out this A-tier running back plays. The Steelers are 29th against the run. This dude rushed for over 100 yards in 3 quarters of play against the Bengals last week, and somehow the Bengals are actually a better run defense than the Steelers right now. The Steelers have been horrible against fantasy running backs, and before he got taken out of the game because they were blowing them out, he played 75% of the snaps. This is a borderline RB1 without Aaron Jones out there. Plus, the Vikings have a couple of things going for them. Number one, Jordan Addison is back, and that's going to help the offense in total, but they're playing in Ireland, and they have a ginger starting at quarterback, so you got that Ireland advantage with Carson Wentz at QB this week, and Jordan Mason, a nice workload. Like I said, he only played 60% of the snaps last week, but it was 75% before the game was a complete blowout against the Cincinnati Bengals. So moving down to the B-tier plays, the first guy already locked into your lineups, Kenneth Walker versus the Arizona Cardinals, 12 fantasy points, sniped on the goal line twice by Zach Charbonnet. The one didn't count because the Jackson Smith and Jigba holding penalty, but that's not great. I mean, you wanted to see after that week 3 performance where Kenneth Walker got back on track. He's had back-to-back games of 18 plus PPR points. You saw him kind of make a mental mistake, get a taunting penalty, and then after that, it looked like he was punished a little bit, and Charbonnet was involved. So if you guys have Kenneth Walker, I think we need to really treat this guy as a mid RB2 who's going to be a little bit inconsistent given what Charbonnet's role is in the backfield. Of course, when Charbonnet's out, he's going to be an obvious guy to have a monster game. But while Charbonnet's on the field, these guys are going to be pests to each other. They're going to snipe carries away from each other. You're not going to feel very great about either guy going into any given week. Running back 16 in my rankings is Ashton Genty. And please, 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 Ashton Genty, this has got to be the week you put it together, because 12 fantasy points, 7.4 fantasy points, and 6.3 fantasy points. For a first-round pick or a borderline first-round pick, this has killed you. He's getting taken out of the game in 2-minute drill, long down and distance situations for Dylan Lowby. He's getting, carries taken away from him from Zamir White, just 60% of the carries the last 2 games. And finally, you have an easy matchup here. You're favored to win this game. This is in Las Vegas against the Bears. They're 1.5-point favorites. So this is the game. This is an easy defense, an easy matchup for you. Ashton Genty has to have a good game here. I'm going to get really worried about this guy. So again, if you're not worried, go buy low on him. But I will say, if it doesn't look good after this game too, then I'm going to be severely concerned about what Ashton Genty's outlook looks like the rest of the season. But generally, I think he's going to get back on track. I like him to go higher than 68.5 rushing yards here over on Underdog. And Underdog has a lot of great promos this week. If you guys are watching the Ryder Cup, there's a gimme pick. Dak Prescott has a gimme pick going tonight. And of course, you can also get the deposit bonus when you sign up with code FSE, which is linked down below. And we're going to continue building out this entry as we go here. Running back 17 for me is Kyren Williams versus the Indianapolis Colts. Kyren's still getting a great workload. However, as I talked about in the waiver video, he's sub 4 yards per carry in back-to-back weeks. And his backfield mate, Blake Corum, is over 6 and 8 yards per carry in those same games. So I think what's going to happen here in the next coming weeks here is Blake Corum's going to start to eat into the groundwork a little bit more. I'd look to sell high on Kyren Williams if you guys can, whether he has a good matchup in this game or not. He had a good game last week, so I would probably try and sell high if you can. It's a good offense. It's a bad matchup, and I do think we might see a little bit more of Corum than we want to see. Running back 18 for me is Chuba Hubbard. He would maybe be a little bit higher than this against the 21st ranked New England Patriots defense. But Chuba Hubbard is listed as questionable with a calf injury. Like I said, he wasn't hurt on Wednesday. And then in Thursday's practice, they downgraded him to limited with a calf injury. And he also was limited on Friday as well. I would expect the 60-ish% of the snaps that we saw last week for Chuba Hubbard, and Dowdle may see a larger share of the touches. But I do expect Chuba Hubbard to play in this game, so I wouldn't be overly concerned about not having him. I just, maybe if you don't have him, go pick up Rico Dowdle in case he re-aggravates that injury or something. Running back 19 for me was Trey Benson, who locked into your lineups on Thursday night versus the Seahawks. They were a pretty good run defense, just 10.4 PPR points per game. In that matchup, his first game as the starter, 53% of the snaps. It was a negative game script. They were trailing most of the time. Tough Seattle run defense. I would use this as a buy low opportunity because people are probably now scared that Amari DiMercado is going to be a major part of this backfield. They're probably scared of, Benson not having a bunch of great rushing lanes to go through. Go buy low on him because people were already skeptical about him before. And now I think you can get him at a nice discount after the big spike in value that he saw after James Conner went down with an injury. Running back 20 for me is Travis Etienne versus the San Francisco 49ers. The Jaguars have a brutal matchup for San Francisco. They are a top 5 defense in EPA per play allowed, but their best pass rusher, probably second best player on the defense behind Fred Warner is now gone. Nick Bosa tore his ACL. Etienne snaps dipped a little bit below 60% for the first time all season. Is that a sign of things to come, or was that a blip on the radar? I tend to think that was a blip on the radar. It wasn't his best game efficiency-wise, and LaQuint Allen ate more into the receiving snaps and routes than usual. I think Liam Cohen decided to move away from him just because he wasn't running very well. But I do think he'll have a chance to bounce back in this one. He's actually the RB9 in fantasy right now. So if you were, worried about Travis Etienne, you worried about Baishal Tutin taking over a workload, I probably wouldn't be. If anything, I'd actually lean towards buying low on him if somebody was really worried about that. J.K. Dobbins is my RB21 for the week, which is closing out this tier. Versus the Cincinnati Bengals, they are 32nd against the fantasy running back position after Jordan Mason carved him up for 3/4 of play, rushed for 114 yards. And J.K. Dobbins played a season high 69% of the snaps, 71% of the carries, 55% of the routes as well for J.K. Dobbins. He's kind of showing himself to be a viable checkdown option for Bo Nix out of the backfield. And he's been basically about 15 fantasy points per game in every single week. And he's RB12 overall in fantasy right now. So this is a nice get-right spot for the Broncos offense. It's at home. It's on Monday Night Football. It's against the team that's down their starting quarterback. So I really like J.K. Dobbins in this matchup to have a great game. Moving down into the C-tier running back plays. And these guys, for one reason or another, I'm a little bit more worried about them. It's not that they don't have good workloads or, talent or whatever. It's just that they might have bad matchups and whatnot. Javonte Williams versus the Green Bay Packers. This is a pretty brutal matchup. They're second against fantasy running backs right now. Javonte's been good this year. Don't get me wrong. You feel good if you drafted him. but his snaps have declined in 3 straight games, and the Packers defense is going to suffocate this offensive line because they're down some players. No CeeDee Lamb, starting offensive linemen are out for this game, and Miles Sanders has looked decent and started to eat into some of that long down and distance work. Maybe it was just game script against the Bears, maybe not, but I actually think the game script pattern might continue this week because even though they're at home, I just think the Packers are the much better team, and they're probably pissed off that they lost to the Browns last week. So I'm just skeptical of Javonte Williams in general. It's not that I think he's a bad option. I just would use him as a sell high candidate right now because he's currently the RB7 in fantasy, and there's no way that keeps up. Like, I think he's more of a back end RB2 at best, and he'll probably start to, fizzle out as the season goes along and finish the year with like 13 fantasy points per game. So if you can get great value for Javonte Williams, go ahead and do it. I actually like him to go lower than his 19.5 receiving yards because he's been pretty inefficient as a receiver. And I do think with the long down and distance snaps gearing towards Sanders last week, they might continue that trend in this game. So running back 23 in my rankings is Quinshon Judkins. They are 13th, the Detroit Lions, against the running back position. The scrappy Browns obviously took down the Packers last week in a hard-fought win. I think the universe course corrects itself, though. I think the Lions probably take care of business and give them an old-fashioned beatdown. I'd like to rank Judkins higher than this because he's been great. But I do think a lot broke right for him last week. Even though it was a tough matchup, he ran the ball well. Even though it was supposed to be a blowout, it wasn't, and they ended up winning the game. I fear that he may get game scripted out of this game against a tough Lions defense that we just saw stifle Derrick Henry last week and has been great against fantasy running backs dating back to the beginning of last year. So I do think that Quinshon Judkins' usage will be great, and he'll get a lot of work. But the 16.5 fantasy points that he scored last week, I wouldn't expect that. If he does, I mean, he's going to be rising up the rankings rest of the season if he continues to have a great game. Especially, I want to see what it looks like when the Browns are losing. Are they going to take him off the field, use Jerome Ford, use Dylan Sampson, or is he just like a 3-down bell cow that they're going to use no matter the game script? Because that would really up his appeal long term and for the rest of the season. My running back 24 on the week is Jaylen Warren versus the Minnesota Vikings. Like I said, we have reports that he's not 100%. So for now, I have him at 24. Could move him down if we hear more negative stuff. Could move him up if we hear more positive stuff. If you are down bad at running back, maybe go roster Kenneth Gainwell or Caleb Johnson because it is possible that one of those guys takes the brunt of the carries if Jaylen Warren is out for this game. I would imagine it would be Gainwell because Caleb Johnson hasn't been good, but who knows? Maybe they would give him the early down work. Jaylen Warren's obviously been great so far this year, top 15 running back in points per game. Running back 25, Chase Brown versus the Denver Broncos. 76% of Chase Brown's touches have resulted in him being hit behind the line of scrimmage, which would be an NFL record if it continues. So Broncos exploitable to the running back position. JT cooked them. Hampton had his breakout game against them last week. We need to see Chase Brown look better. We need to see Jake Browning look better too. So hopefully that course corrects a little bit on Monday Night Football. Chase Brown's still getting a really solid workload, although in week 3, we did see him drop to 56% of the snaps and just 48% of the carries after basically getting every carry in the backfield for the first 2 games. And last week, Taj Brooks, the rookie running back from Texas Tech, was also active for the first time, and he saw some work. So hopefully Chase Brown can get back on track for those of you guys that have him, because if he can't, I think we're going to start to see a little bit more Taj Brooks, and maybe stash him at the end of your bench if you have an open spot. 26 is Cam Scatterbo versus the Los Angeles Chargers. If this was a better matchup, I would rank him higher. The Giants are 7th in EPA between the 20s, but 31st in the red zone. So hopefully Jackson Dart, Cam Scatterbo can help that. The RPOs, the mobile quarterback, the grinder type running back that he is. We saw him command 61% of the routes in his first start. If you need wins ASAP, I might be buying high on Cam Scatterbo because that type of receiving usage, a 31% target share as well, is going to result in him being a great fantasy option. And he finished as a top 5 fantasy running back on the week last week. So Cam Scatterbo, again, maybe I'll look stupid for having him this low. Maybe I should have him in the tier with the Walkers and the Genties and those guys. But I just want to see it for one more week. And again, the Chargers defense is really, really good. And it's a rookie quarterback in his first start. So I'm a little bit worried about that stuff. But it wouldn't shock me if he's really elevated his way up my rest of season rankings a week from now. David Montgomery versus the Browns, pretty straightforward. The run will be a huge focus for the Detroit Lions in this game. They're 10-point home favorites. They're implied for 27.25 points. Definitely look to sell high on David Montgomery because he busted off like a 70-yard touchdown, and he also had 2 touchdowns in that game. So he is, again, a running back that is game script dependent, who's going to be a back-end RB2, high-end RB3, unless Jahmyr Gibbs is down with an injury. So if you can get good value for David Montgomery on the open market, you should definitely go ahead and do that. And given that he's the RB8 overall in fantasy right now, there's a very good chance you can get pretty good value for him. So Running back 28 for me in my rankings is Trevion Henderson versus the Carolina Panthers. They are 9th against the fantasy football running back position. Henderson should be, I don't know for sure, should be slated to get the starting job this week because last week he posted a season high in snaps, in carry rate, and routes, 87% of the snaps and 7 touches on 14 plays, and the only running back to touch the football after Stevenson and Gibson's fumbling woes. So there's a good chance that Trevion Henderson's going to have a bigger workload than we're used to seeing. I like him to go higher than his 37.5 rushing yards, and that's going to complete our pick'em entry. If you guys want to tail it, of course, do it down below in the pinned comment. That is how you can sign up over on Underdog. And again, there's a Dak Prescott gimme pick live for Sunday Night Football. There's a Profit Boost token live for the Ireland game as well. Tons of promos this week. There's also going to be a gimme pick for Monday Night Football. And like I said, the Ryder Cup, I believe, if it's already underway, then you probably missed the boat. But there was a gimme pick and a Profit Boost for that as well. So definitely check that out. Tail the picks if you guys are interested. And of course, use the promo code FSE. They also just upped their new customer bonus so that when you make your first play of $5, you actually get $100 in bonus funds as opposed to 50 like you were getting before. So check that out if you guys are interested. Running back 29 for me closing out this tier is Tony Pollard versus the Houston Texans. This guy's getting an elite workload, but he is so mediocre as a running back right now. When you're getting 84% of your team's carries and 70% of your team's routes, 90% of your team snaps, and your output is 10.3 fantasy points per game in PPR, that is abysmal. And if you guys have the opportunity to stash Tajay Spears right now, you should probably be doing it because once he is eligible to come back, which is starting next week, he might have a chance to really take over this job because Pollard just doesn't look excellent this year, and the offense is just sputtering and bumbling everywhere, and Brian Callahan's probably going to get fired this week, next week, the week after. At some point, he's going to lose his job, and this workload should produce a top 5 fantasy running back. Like, this is an insane workload that he's getting, and he is not even an RB2 in fantasy right now. So that's why I'm burying him in the rankings, although he is getting a great workload, and you probably still got to start him for that reason. The D tier plays at the running back position, very similar. We have DeAndre Swift, who's getting a nice workload, but it is dwindling since week 1. If you can't get it done in that game against the Dallas Cowboys where your quarterback is on fire, your offense is moving the ball at will, I don't know when you're going to have a good game. That's where I'm at with DeAndre Swift, man. Like Roshan Johnson, Kyle Menengai, these guys aren't significant pieces to disrupt his workload in the backfield. He's a usable option as long as he's getting the touches, but he's just so unbelievably mid right now that I don't want to throw him out there because at best, what you're getting out of DeAndre Swift is like 10 fantasy points. He's just not giving you really good production when you need it. And staying in this tier, we also have Bill Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt versus the Falcons. Total opposite situation here because he's not getting the workload and he's banged up currently. The quarterback, the number 1 wide receiver are out for this game. Bill's yet to crack a 40% snap share on the season, and I don't think he'll do it this week either because he's banged up. Chris Rodriguez is going to get some carries. Jeremy McNichols going to take away the third down stuff. So I would say that assuming he plays, he is the best start of the Commanders' backs right now, but it is a 3-way timeshare, and it is generally pretty disgusting. Isaiah Pacheco versus the Baltimore Ravens, speaking of disgusting, I know he's been absolute garbage. Like, you cannot trust Isaiah Pacheco right now, but the Chiefs are at home versus a top 12 matchup for fantasy running backs for a guy who's still getting 60% of the snaps in week 2, 58% of the snaps in week 3. With Xavier Worthy coming back, maybe that opens up the box a little bit for Isaiah Pacheco to run better. I know this is copium because I have him in the flock league. He's definitely not a start if you have better options. I would start 45 plus receivers over this dude if it's a flex decision for you. But Isaiah Pacheco is not the most awful start you can have given that the Chiefs are at home against a defense that is not very good against the run. So it's probably going to result in 5 fantasy points. I realize that, but there's a chance that he has a little bit of a better game. He honestly just needs to play better. Like, he's actually getting a nice workload, and I think that would continue if he continues to play better, but he is playing like ass right now. So we got to figure it out, Isaiah Pacheco. Closing out this tier, we have Nick Chubb versus the Tennessee Titans, 17th against fantasy running backs. It's a good game script. They're 7-point favorites. He's a worthwhile flex play for that reason. Last week, we saw Woody Marks' snap share increase with the Texans losing. Maybe this week we'll see Nick Chubb's snap share increase with the Texans winning. So that I feel pretty good about. Moving down to the final tier of running backs here, we just have like my final 5 or 6 guys. You see there Rashad White, Byshell Tootin, RJ Harvey, Ramondre Stevenson, Jeremy McNichols, and Kareem Hunt. These are flex plays at best. If you are desperate, you could throw them out there, but I'd hope you'd have better options than this. And I would probably start 50 to 55 to 60 receivers over these guys in my flex. Like I would start Alec Manor types, Troy Franklin types, Trey Tucker types over these guys in my flex. But Rachaad White, probably going to be a good game script for him. I think the Eagles will probably get it done and beat us. Unfortunately, I just think that we're too banged up to be able to handle them. And without Mike Evans last year, he saw his role increase as a receiver. So I do like him to potentially, get some receiving touches in this game. Byshell Tootin has a small role and he's explosive. Whatever 5 to 10 touches he gets, he can make a defense pay on those. RJ Harvey took a step backwards last week with Dobbins performing like he did, but maybe he gets more work in this game script. And then Ramondre Stevenson definitely has, a lot to prove to the Patriots because he was fumbling his ass off last week, but he might still get a nice workload enough to play him. Jeremy McNichols getting the Austin Eckler role. You could definitely get some receiving touches. Plus he scored like a 70-yard touchdown last week. And Kareem Hunt probably going to snipe Isaiah Pacheco on the goal line yet again. So that was the running back tier list. Hopefully you guys got some value from it. Hopefully I helped you set your lineup. Let me know what you think of the new format. Is there anything you would change? Anything you want to see on the screen that's not currently on the screen? As I made mention to, in green is the PPR points per game. In blue is the implied point total. In yellow is their fantasy points per game rank at running back. And then they also have there the opponent that they're going up against, Christian McCaffrey, the name there, obviously. So that should be a much better format for you guys, and appreciate the devs for getting this one cranked out for us, because hopefully this will help you guys with a better visual experience, a better actual experience for these videos. So let me know down below if you guys are tailing us too. We're going to roll with a flex play. 3 out of 4 is what we need to make some cash. 4 out of 4 obviously would be a big win for us. And of course, if you guys do want to tail that, head on over to Underdog Fantasy, use the code FSE. Get that new customer bonus there. Play $5, get 100 in bonus funds. And when you make your first deposit on the site, you do actually get a 50% deposit match for using our promo code. So if you want to check that out, that'll be linked down below in the pinned comment. And of course, flockfantasy.com, promo code FSE will get you all of our rest of season rankings, weekly rankings, start sit rankings, everything you guys possibly need. Our dynasty rankings are now fully up to date. Our dynasty trade value chart fully up to date as well. So definitely check that out if you guys are interested. That will be linked down below in the pinned comment in addition to the Underdog sign up link. So like, comment, subscribe if you enjoyed. Peace out, and I'll talk to you soon.